In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
There's no way for us to know how people felt when they saw the temple in Jerusalem, what it was like to walk on the stone pavements with the faint smell of incense in the air and the overpowering stink of animals lined up for sacrifice. But we can imagine how the place crackled with intense spiritual energy, inspiring awe and fear and excitement. For here, the presence of God dwelled like nowhere else on earth. Even someone with a stunted sense of reverence would have been able to feel the pulsing rhythm of sacredness that would just send a chill down your spine. It must have been indescribable. Now, some of us have gone to places like our National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., or maybe St. Paul's in London, or St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. All wondrous spaces that will just take your breath away. Their glory brightly reflects God's glory. They stand as a testament of sacrifice and of the joy of offering devoted to God's purposes. Each in their own way strive to emulate the temple. Yet no matter how ornate or holy, they are but pale shadows of it. Still, imagine how you would feel if somebody you knew and trusted, someone wise and powerful, said that each and all of those buildings, including our family home here at St. Luke's, would be razed to the ground in the not-so-distant future. At first, I think it would be disbelief. That's simply not possible. Then perhaps we'd feel a twinge of anxiety. What if it's true? How our lives would change. And after some thought about how we might be able to stop it, we'd want to know when. What clues will there be that this terrible thing is about to happen? And then as reality set in, a little anticipatory grief that something we adore and cherish will soon be no more. That's probably how people felt when Jesus predicted that the temple, which they'd just been admiring, would be torn apart. It's a little surprising that they immediately took Jesus at his word, but many of them had watched him perform miracles and listened to his parables that opened up new horizons of thought and possibility. So they just wanted to know when, so they could get ready, I guess. And Jesus gave them a horrifying list of events that would occur prior to the temple's destruction. Fake messiahs who declare, "I am the chosen one." Global war and rebellions, starvation, epidemics, earthquakes. They would be betrayed by those closest to them, hated and persecuted for their faith. Once Jesus stopped talking, the temple coming down was probably the least of their worries. The whole fabric of their lives was going to unravel, and there was only one way out: deny Jesus, abandon the faith. How many did that is anybody's guess, but in 70 AD, near the end of a failed rebellion, after the ground had become muddy with blood, the Romans took the temple down. A wasteful act of arrogance and vengeance. Their attempt to destroy the identity of an entire nation, to crush their very souls. With the temple, God's dwelling place, ruined, where was God now? Of course, it didn't work. People mourned their losses. Some surely had doubts. Others probably faded away. But Judaism adapted. They changed how they worshiped, how they related to God. Their common suffering became a source of shared healing, a force that bound them together as never before, as a people determined to endure, always with the hope that the day of cruel desecration would one day be followed by restoration, by justice. And the disciples of Jesus did too, spreading the gospel like little tendrils of hope throughout the empire, infiltrating it. At first, the empire wasn't sure what to do with this bunch, but eventually decided that this new faith, changing people's lives, changing their habits and loyalties, constituted a threat that demanded a forceful response. Hideous lies were told about the early Christians. Many were exiled, tortured, or killed. Obviously, it didn't work because here we are. But how? In the midst of listing the terrifying things to come, Jesus sprinkled in a few promises. First, those who were captured and questioned would receive from Jesus words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. They didn't need to worry about what to say. And what a relief that had to be. Knowing that a conflict is coming, we often rehearse the conversation in our minds. Try to hone our arguments as sharply as possible, anticipate what our opponents are going to say and do. It is maddening and can become an obsession. But when we're being confronted by enemies of Christ, there's no reason to worry or put in a lot of prep time, because Jesus has us covered. We will be given the words of witness that will reveal the truth that Christ's love overcomes hatred. Second, Jesus assured his followers that by your endurance you will gain your souls. Now, this doesn't mean that by hanging tough, the disciples would somehow earn their way into heaven. Instead, by staying open to Jesus and relying solely on him, by receiving his wise words and proclaiming them during times of great struggle and peril, they would receive a gift of their souls lost to sin. But it's more than just about what happens after we die. To gain one's soul happens in the here and now too. But what does that mean? To gain your soul means that you've given it to Jesus, who dwells within you, making each of us a temple of God's presence, more glorious than any building ever could be, yet in that glory humble and grateful for the opportunity to serve as witnesses to God's much greater glory. A light shines forth from the soul inhabited by Jesus, a light brighter than sun-striking gold. Some people are attracted to that light. Others, living in the darkness, are repulsed by it. But those who give their souls to Jesus and allow him to dwell within find peace and fulfillment and belonging and joy more than could really be described. You need to experience it. Desirable as all this sounds, though, many say no. And it's hard to blame them. Because when Jesus comes into a person's life, a lot of things change. And we have mixed feelings about change. It kindles both fear and excitement, and the proportion of those two visceral emotions is determined by how we view change, how much we like or don't like it. Getting engaged, for example. When I proposed and Stephanie said yes, I was so excited. This is the best day of my life. I am so blessed that this astonishing woman accepts me for who I am and wants to spend her life with me. It's going to be wonderful. At the same time, down on one knee, I couldn't help but think, what if she says no? Or even worse, let me think about it. This is the biggest decision of my life. This choice will affect my entire life in ways that I can't predict until my dying day. On balance, excitement won by a large margin. But sometimes fear does instead. And we get paralyzed and indecisive or ready to run from or fight whatever that change may be. At its least disruptive, change can be inconvenient, causing us to devote time and energy to this instead of that, when we're actually quite fond of that. It challenges long-held, cherished assumptions about how the world works and our role in it. When we let Jesus into our lives, theology trumps ideology, and our perspective shifts as a new vision comes into focus. Change can also be risky. To let go of one thing for another, there aren't any ironclad guarantees, just faith and the hope that the new will bring greater blessings and grace. And change can be painful. When I came here over 5 years ago, I was scared and hurting. Was I excited to start a new life with you? Extremely excited. But I left behind in Virginia hundreds of people, some of whom I had served and loved for over 12 years. At our farewell party, the parish gave me a basket full of letters, more than 100 of them, telling me what my work there meant to them. It was an amazing and moving gift, and it took me 2 months to start opening those letters. And once I did, it was really tough. I came here. Our family made that change because I deeply felt that this is what God wanted for my family, for our family. And I have no regrets. I'm more convinced now than ever before that we belong together. But with the change and all its blessings did come some pain and grief and remorse. And if we ignore that part of how Jesus affects us, if we ignore that, then that's the witness we will give to other people. A sanitized version of the Christian life. And then one of two things will happen. People will kind of flirt with the faith, won't make the necessary commitment, and end up fading away. Or they will figure out what we left out and not be too happy about it. When faced with the radical change that Jesus brings, we've got to ask why. Why embrace that change? And to answer that question, we need to ask several more with unflinching honesty. Is this the best life I can live, or is there something much more? Do I want to settle for happy when true joy is within reach? Is optimism enough, or would hope be better? Am I okay with being content, or would the prospect of deep and abiding peace be worth taking a few risks? Shall I stay small and safe, or let God carry me to greater things? Many of us have asked and answered those questions many times. It's not easy. And sometimes, as we go through life, our responses change. But the more we choose Jesus and the change that he brings, the more we begin to perceive a vision, not only of a new life, but of a new world. It's not just change for the sake of change. It's change for the sake of Jesus. It is change for the sake of those who suffer from injustice, from hunger, physical and spiritual. It is change for the sake of the gullible and the foolish who lack godly wisdom and in their ignorance lash out. It is change for the hateful and the resentful, imprisoned by their demons. Allowing God to work through us to give mercy and forgiveness and transformation is why we were created. It's why we live, to gain our souls and help others gain theirs. And that's a vision worth living and dying for. That's a vision worth putting up with some change.